Hey there Workforce, Chris here with Work to Game, and today I'd like to talk about Endgame. Now as Stormblood finishes out its spectrum of content and we get into our first Savage and some Extremes, you're starting to see where statics can sometimes get ahead of people who rely on pugs to clear content. And honestly, at first glance, any player that doesn't have the time to go out and find a pre-made group and doesn't want to dedicate a schedule that they can stick to, obviously doesn't really want to make a priority out of clearing that content. And if a casual player is being told this, they might think that if it takes that much work to get into, it's probably not even that fun of content for them. Now these groups can be called raid groups, statics, pre-mades, whatever, but you're talking about high-level play that often gets associated with high anxiety. But the question is, can it bring more joy? If you've had a chance to watch a stream over on Twitch on Wednesday nights, you see that we get together with a group of people we just happen to know in real life to PvP. That doesn't make us good at it, doesn't make us experts, and it is really enjoyable. But technically that does make us an 8-man pre-made. And Savage and Extreme is really put in there by the developers to see if you can do this harder mode, if you can take the concepts you already understand and master them at a little bit higher level and trade for maybe a little bit better loot. Oftentimes your entry-level hard modes are mostly mechanic-based. If your group can consistently not have anybody die by not standing in things and actually anticipating the next phase and making the adjustments necessary, after that it's just rinse and repeat until your DPS lines it up and you get the kill. Now as you progress further into these hard modes, they will have to go ahead and continue to ramp up that difficulty to continue to challenge those players. So what they're going to do is they're going to go with either kind of soft enrages or hard enrages, and what that means is a soft enrage is where a mechanic is kind of technically impossible after a certain point. You may have had a clear where only the tank was left standing. That meant to wipe your group, but technically it didn't. As opposed to a hard enrage where the boss just comes down to the big meteor, kills the whole party instantly, there is no avoiding it. And these can be due to things like DPS checks, where you have to do a certain amount of DPS. Think about taking down like Ifrit's nails, or taking down a boss before he gets to the point that he takes out the entire level at once, because he's taking out a quarter, then 2 quarters, then 3 quarters, and then boom, he's going to wipe you by that point. Think about healer checks, where you talk about, okay, everybody's going to get knocked down to 1 health, and then he's going to send out raid-wide damage in 20 seconds. You have 20 seconds to get everybody back up, or they die. And you have tank buster moves, and you have gear checks, and all these different things that take place where you can start to have a mechanic where if everybody's not grouped together or everybody's not spread out, it can wipe the entire group, so it requires absolute precision. But in trade for that, the higher it is and the more difficult it is to complete it, the more a sense of reward you'll get when you do clear it. Not to mention really cool titles, really cool mounts, and fantastic gear. But is this the only reason to form a group? Because within the MMO, it's easy to see how, you know, the Savage gear from a year ago doesn't even mean anything now, and I can go back and farm those bosses for the mounts anytime I want. No, I don't think it is. I think your statics and kind of getting a free company or a link shell that has a group of people that you play with regularly is actually pretty cool, because it gets you to do things you wouldn't have done otherwise. You talk about all the players pre-cap that get burned out by getting multiple characters to 30 and always feeling like the game never got any better because they never pushed a character into endgame, so they quit. Well, that same thing can happen as you hit endgame. When we play with other friends that are maybe in different points in the game, they'll be like, hey, do you mind helping me go grind fates? Or do you guys want to do maps, which I would never do on my own? And it can push you into sides of the game that you wouldn't have known were fun, that breathe new life into it. And Duty Finder and Party Finder are great stand-ins for what they are, but finding a group that can take content to exactly the level you're at is really the dream. The question just becomes, how do I find that? How do I find people that aren't either more casual than me, or they're not on at the same time as me, or I'm holding them back? Because being a gamer is not just this static thing. I was a very different gamer in college, and the same group of people I would have played with back then would be disappointed in the player I am now. By the other side of that, players who are kind of where I'm at now as far as casual, sometimes I have trouble running with, because you have everything from people who don't know how mechanics work to just absolutely not understanding why anybody else isn't operating at this premier level because they play 50 hours a week, why don't you? And everything in between. I don't really line up with different parts of different groups, and so how do I find that perfect free company? And Final Fantasy does a lot to make sure that this level of elitism doesn't take over. You have meters that are out there, but we're not allowed to talk about them, and we're not allowed to have them in-game. And the problem with that is that meters are what allow me to run my numbers on forums against other people's numbers that are in the same gear level, on the same fight, with the same class, in the same group makeup. And so I can say, okay, wow, you know, this is where I fell 2 weeks ago, and I've really only gotten 1 piece since then. I must have improved how well I'm doing my rotation on this fight. And one of the things that can really draw elite players and really separate that divide is kind of making sure that you're doing all your gear correctly and all your skill rotations correctly. But Final Fantasy has done a lot to make that very static as well. You don't see 15, 20 different items that are all I-320. It just doesn't exist. And some games do go that direction. And these are big things Square Enix has put in place to shape the culture. And the culture of Final Fantasy XIV is unique compared to other MMOs. And so the question is, what are they doing to make it that way? And what are they doing to make it into what it will become from here? Because it's ever changing. And is that something that we have a part in? And this is the time to ask this question, because as Stromblood rounds out its content, you're starting to see more and more characters hitting that I-320, and it's time to start getting into the higher end content. And what are you thinking of Stromblood's content? A lot of people are actually saying that Savage Omega is too easy, but then I have some casual friends that this is one of the first times they felt that Savage is something they want to be doing. So that's the question. Are static groups required for Final Fantasy? If not, should they be? Where do they fit into MMOs? And how do you go about finding one? Would love to hear from you. I hope you guys are having a great week. This has been Chris with Work to Game, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching. YouTube has a pretty cool video waiting for you over here. Our latest vlog is down below. For those of you new, subscribe is over here. And all of our other contact info is just right below me here. Thanks for watching.